Welcome back to the C2 Space Chronicles, where we share the iterative, messy, definitely experimental process of studying human physiology in extreme environments. Today's video is about three particular studies that I am going to focus on, not only because they are about the DSST, but because they look at particular factors which are going to be informative in our process of designing a study to better understand cognitive impairment caused by nitrogen narcosis. Specifically, what does it mean to be cognitively impaired? And as you know, this is a video in a series of videos, so if you haven't started watching from the start, I strongly encourage you to do so. But in any case, I am going to share a very cool tech tip that I came across. Did not invent it at all, but I am very grateful to whoever did invent it. And if for anything else, you should stick around to look at this particular tech tool. It's really pretty impressive. Okay. So the first study that I want us to look at today is the effects of sleeping deprivation on dissociated components of executive functioning by Tucker et al. And obviously, this is interesting for several reasons. One, because it is looking at DSST, and it is looking at it because it's specifically the researchers understood that cognitive impairment is a multifaceted term. And they're trying to understand which facets of cognition are being impacted by lack of sleep. The other reason I really like this study is because it was using DSST and looking at how people do when they have been sleep deprived on the DSST. And why is that important, right? I mean, I'm looking at nitrogen narcosis. I'm not looking at sleepy. Well, here's the thing. If we start seeing that the impact on cognition as measured by DSST is no worse or less than that caused by sleep deprivation, then we are onto something. Because that would mean that when you are having this feeling down at 40, 30, 50, 60 meters, whatever it may be, if your cognition as measured by the DSST is no worse than it would be if you are sleep deprived, then as a matter of scale, we are not looking at something that is, for example, comparable to drunkenness, right? Except and unless you are looking at extremes, right? Extreme sleep deprivation. But that's not what we're looking at here. And so it's interesting because it starts answering this question of effect size, which just as a refresher, effect size is what difference matters to us. What are we looking for? And in the DSST context, is a difference of 2 or 3 points on the DSST significant enough that we care, right? Or are we looking for differences of 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 points difference in your scores in order to be able to say that, yes, so your cognition is impaired as measured by the DSST. So this particular study was done over 23 healthy adults with an age range of 22 to 38 years old. There were 11 women. 12 subjects were randomized to be sleep deprived, and then the others, 11, were the controls. And just to cut to the chase, there was a significant degradation in the performance based on sleep deprivation. And when we are saying sleep deprivation, the people in this study were deprived of sleep for 51 hours. So we are talking significant sleep deprivation. One particular sentence that I really thought was interesting is, one reason that different views exist as to how and why executive functioning may be degraded during sleep deprivation is that the tasks commonly used to measure executive functions do not allow dissociation of the various cognitive processes contributing to performance. And as you know, this is pretty much the key of what we're trying to understand with our study, and this disaggregation of the various functions related to cognition was very interesting. In the sleep-deprived group, the subjects first received 2 baseline nights, and each time with a 10-hour time in bed for sleep. They were then kept awake, and I misspoke, it's not 51, it's actually 62 hours. They were kept awake for 62 hours, which entailed missing the next 2 nights of sleep. Then they were allowed to do 2 nights of recovery with 10 hours of time in bed each night. And then the tests were continuously given to be able to see if there was a recovery and how quick the recovery was after sleep deprivation. Now, while the subjects were deprived of sleep for 62 hours, and this is where the 51-hour number comes from, their sleep deprivation measurement was taken at the 51-hour mark. And the idea was that this would allow for a strong enough pressure to want to sleep to build up, so that you were really looking at what it looked like when there was a sleep deprivation and a strong hunger to go back to sleep. And here we have the results. And it is very obvious, right? Like, I don't even have to tell you which one is the sleep deprived line. It's the one that has the massive cataclysmic collapse in the middle. And the sleep deprivation is actually between the two vertical lines on each side of that cataclysmic drop off in performance. Now, the tool I want to show you is so cool. It is such a cool tool. And it is called Plotdigitizer. And I'm going to show it to you now. The Plotdigitizer allows you to go ahead and upload a screenshot of whatever it is that you're trying to measure. And here you are able to place what your x-axis and your y-axis are. And then you're going to go ahead and place your y-axis values. And then right here on the right-hand corner side, you're going to write in, so my X values I know are actually 0 to 144 total hours. And here's the cool thing. If I go ahead and mark these points, it will actually tell me what my X and my Y value are on the left-hand corner, on the left-hand side. And I can actually export that as an Excel spreadsheet or as a number of other formats. But that allows you to then manipulate the particular data. And I just thought this is literally the coolest thing I've ever seen. I mean, you can take any picture, any scatter plot, and the very cool thing about that is that in doing so, I was then able to run some R code, and I grouped the data by either sleep deprived or not sleep deprived, and I was able to figure out that their mean score for the control group was 122 correct items, and the mean score for the sleep deprived group was 108. And that was good in the sense that it starts giving me a sense of that big drop off. What is it that we are looking at? Now, one of the things that was a little frustrating when we were trying to do this way is that I don't have the actual data, right? And these are just means. And so I don't actually have the underlying data. Even if I use Plotdigitizer, which is a great tool, all I'm getting is the mean values for each of those data points. And so the next thing I wanted to try to figure out is, okay, but what is the standard deviation of each of these data sets? Now, the standard deviation I don't have, but I can get there by using the standard error. Now, the standard error is the standard error of the sample, and it is given to you by dividing standard deviation by the square root of n, which is the number of individuals in that sample. So you will tell me, okay, Juji, but you don't have standard error either. Okay, I don't have standard error, but what I do have are these lines. And these lines right here are in fact the standard error. And so what I was able to do is that I was able to click on each of these points and give myself the standard errors for each of the points. Having obtained the standard errors, I was then able to backtrack, plug it into the equation, and figure out what was the standard deviation for the actual data. Having said that, it only helps a certain amount. And why is that the case? Because DSSTs are administered in different ways. Some of them are on paper, some of them are on computer, some of them are on phones, some of them are on tablets. And if you saw the first video, you will know that that's one big challenge we are grappling with, and that's a whole other subject. And so if I get a certain score on a paper-based DSST, it's not comparable to anybody else's score on a tablet. It's not even comparable to my own score on a tablet. And so this is where the concept of a Z-score comes into place. A z-score is a way to measure how a score compares to the mean of that group. And that's actually really intuitive if you think about it from a grades perspective. That's a really common example everybody, most people will understand. If I tell you that I got a 56 out of 100 on an exam, you're going to think, maybe you suck. That's not so good. Okay. But immediately, if I tell you, I got a 56, but the class average was 45, then you'll know, oh, that must have been a really hard exam, and you actually did pretty well. That's kind of what the z-score is going at conceptually. It's trying to say, okay, you got a certain score out of an objective total, but what does it actually mean compared to how everybody else did on that particular exercise? And so as we move forward, we are going to be starting calculating z-scores so that we can understand how far off the mean, right? How many standard deviations are there depending on whether you are sleep deprived or in a control group, or alternatively, and we're going to talk about these studies, if you're drunk versus a control group, or if you are cold versus a warmer control group. Pretty heavy stuff this week for sure. Fascinating, really interesting. I loved this deep dive. I hope you love this deep dive into literature review, into data. And I just wanted to obviously share that there's big news this week. We have a Patreon account. The link is down in the comments. And we would love for you to join us. You can select your level of commitment, and you are going to get all of these extra little goodies that we are preparing. And we have these great ideas for content we want to share with you, from bloopers to exclusive podcast interview with aerospace medicine physicians. I hope you join us on this trek. It is truly a passion of mine to talk about science, to make science clearer, and to show you the messy side of science. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for following the C2 Space Chronicles. My name is Juji Carminati, and see you next time.